Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Hollywood Planning Commission meeting on Thursday, May 3rd. This is a regular meeting. I'm going to call on Mr. Andrew Campbell. Would you come forward and lead us in the flag salute, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Gilly, can you call the roll, please?
Good evening. Tonight, Commissioner Guy is absent, so the minutes will reflect that and the roll call votes.
Next item is
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Present.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Here.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Elchel?
Here.
Vice Chair Jones?
Here.
Chair Buckner?
And I'm here. Thank you.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes, April
Chair,
5th.
approval of the agenda first, please.
Oh, sorry. Approval, I checked it off, unfortunately, ahead of my approval of the agenda. Do we have approval? I'd like to make some corrections. I understand that we have some continuances on the agenda. I think all three items, unfortunately, for different reasons, need to be continued. So with that in mind, I think 10A, do you want staff to weigh in on this?
Yeah, actually, the couple of the items, we just wanted to kind of go over what's going on as far as the continuance. For the 947 Genesee and 944 North Ogden, we did have a noticing issue. I wanted to defer to David Gillig, our commission secretary, just to explain what was going on in further detail.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We want to thank Commissioner Bass for bringing this to our attention, actually. This is like a first for us. The mapping company that we actually use for our radius maps, we had the correct 500-foot radius in the map. However, the addresses were not included within the radius mailing. It went out to a different set of addresses for a completely different address. So we've contacted our mapping company. We redid the radius map. We checked it, and it went out again today for a postmark for the May 17th meeting. So that will be legally corrected and noticed.
And that's the
That's for items, the 947 Genesee and 944 North Ogden Drive.
Okay, so both of those, we had this.
Well, that's one item.
It's one item. Okay, so that one, I believe there's a recommendation to continue it to May 17th. Is
That's
that
correct, yeah.
So with that correction,
And then, yeah.
we've got more.
For Crescent Heights, I just wanted to let you know on that one, there is still some figuring out of affordable housing density bonus issues. At this point, we're not comfortable moving forward on that until we resolve that issue. And for Spalding, the applicant has requested that we continue it. They are still working out some issues internally with their design of the project and have requested to come back probably sometime in the summer, so they would like to continue that to a date uncertain.
Okay,
So with respect to B, is that a date uncertain, or?
Yes, that's a date uncertain as well.
Those two are date uncertain.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we give the public extra notice on that one, so we feel it's better to be conservative and renotice that.
Are all three items therefore being renoticed?
The only one that won't be renoticed is Genesee, because that will be coming on our next meeting.
You said that it was being mailed, so is...
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, but it's
The new notice.
that's correct, yeah.
So all three are being renoticed?
Yes,
yes.
yeah, for different reasons. One was because of a noticing area, the other two were because of other issues.
Okay, well, with those things,
Can I just add a comment to that?
Yes.
On the continuances? I did send an email to staff today, and I'd like to request that while these things need to be expedited, we're all for moving things forward. I want to be very careful about not jamming up the calendar and causing roadblocks in the hearing process, in particular when we have an EIR to review, which becomes a substantial review. I want to make sure that these other items don't trickle onto that same calendar and we end up with an incomplete hearing.
Understood. We'll be very careful as we do our scheduling to make sure that the commission has adequate time to have a hearing, especially with those EIR projects, as you mentioned.
Thank
But
you
just
very
for
much.
the record, there is no EIR project on the items that are considered this evening.
No, no environmental documents tonight.
No, it's just about the Arts Club in particular, which is coming up, and potentially these things could end up on that same calendar day, and that's a big EIR and
Right.
a lot to review.
Well, our calendars are busy coming up, so I trust staff will do their best to make sure that commission isn't overloaded and public has an opportunity to review the projects as well. So thank you very much. So,
Okay, we have Commissioner Bass that moved the item for the agenda.
thank
With
you,
your changes.
Commissioner. With the changes. And a second.
And seconded by Vice Chair Jones. And the motion carries unanimous as amended.
So that is the approval of the agenda. Now we're going on to the minutes. I'd like to do them one at a time because I understand there's some comments by commissioners on them. On April 5th draft minutes, is there a motion to move that one forward, or are there comments on that? So then let's take a vote and approve the minutes. Can we just have a yay or nay on April 5th minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those draft minutes are approved. April 19th, which has the verbatim transcription. Commissioner Rubino, did you have a comment?
I just had a couple corrections. I think David's going to read them into the record.
Yeah, I'll read them into the record. Thank you, Commissioner. On page 51, line number 22, these are verbatim minutes. We need to add a question mark to, I don't have the sentence in front of me, I'm sorry. But there'll be a question mark added to that end of the sentence. Page 96, line 10, I'll leave IT to the lawyers.
Say again?
You do it, because the email was a little brief and you could only understand it in context. It was just
Page again, 96?
Page 51, it was just, I asked what the city of residence was, and it wasn't stated as a question, so I just said it should be a question. On page 96, line 10, I said, so I will leave it to the lawyers, the it is missing. And on page 136, it says, and intense has always been, and then the actual sentence was, and the intent has always been. So it's adding the and taking out the S. Just typos.
It says we will get that amended.
So with those changes, can we approve those minutes? Motion? All in favor of approving the minutes with the corrections for April 19th, 2018?
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Next item is public comment. Do we have speakers tonight on this?
We do. We have two. Our first public speaker is Wesley Brettel.
Commissioners, Wesley Bridle, West Hollywood. Thank you for your time. I just wanted to get up here and say that we need more housing. So I think both of the projects that were originally on the agenda tonight do a great job of that. However, we also need more affordable housing. And so I think one building with under 10% is unacceptable. And I also think, and I know that you can't move on an action because of the Brown Act, but we need to mimic our LA natives and disallow the buyout, because we need more affordable housing here in West Hollywood. Thank you so much.
Thank you. George Bajarki?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is George Boyarski. I'm a resident of West Hollywood. I'd like to speak not on a general subject, but for what's been happening to the neighborhood and the procedures that go under that. The building, well, there's already been one blockbuster, and that was the building approved on Romaine between Genesee and Ogden. I think in a neighborhood of 1- and 2-story buildings, any building that is 3 stories high and usually expands to 2 lots is a bulk. But there is upcoming, and it was supposed to be on the agenda today, a proposal for a building that is really very large, and it's going to be 4 stories. It's going to erase a lot of trees that have been sort of like a mini park for the neighborhood, and it's a lot of trees barring a public, the nearest public park. The proposal has gone through 1 planning committee meeting, 2 at least neighborhood meetings, and I and others have had discussions with, I don't mean it's in any bad sense, the go-between between the developer and the community. There have been a lot of views voiced. The thing is that in all those discussions, the building was presented in a certain way in terms of outside appearance, in terms of how the bulk would be handled. From the notice on the building now, there's substantial difference between everything that was discussed and the way the building appears now. It has some color, although it was almost neon green, and it had some attempt at design. Now, the picture that's shown is a bunch of little squares sticking out, and none of that it's going to come to you with the recommendation of staff, at which point it's sort of hard to vote against. But I just want to say that this is a very, it will impact the neighborhood in a very substantial way. And so I think somehow there ought to be time.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
the
sir.
time is up. Our buzzer is
Well,
not working.
you get the gist of my meaning. I'd like
To
to
finish what your sentence and then,
I can't remember what my.
okay, we'll take a moment to think about it.
I'm just saying that in particular, although other things might be termed substantial, for the community, this is a substantial initiative on the part of the developer, and that it's going to be presented in a form very different from which it has been discussed.
Thank you very much for your comments.
I'd like to thank the chair for following up on the hard hats in the construction site.
Thank you.
I think the people wearing the hard hats now are basically of Hispanic origin, and they don't like it, but I think safety should be
Safer.
spread to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers at this time?
No other speakers.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next item. There's a director's report. Mr. Kehoe.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. I just have one item to bring you tonight, and that's our seismic retrofitting conversation. Some of you may have seen in the paper today, there was an article on our ordinance. Also, I just want to make sure everyone here and in the public are aware that we are having continued meetings on possible landlord-tenant cost sharing. There's a meeting Wednesday, May 9th at 7 p.m. Here at the West Hollywood Library Community Meeting Room. There's another meeting on Monday, May 14th at 7 p.m. Plummer Park Fiesta Hall. So that's a time for residents to come and talk about the possibility of landlord-tenant cost sharing as part of the seismic retrofitting conversation. So that's all I have.
John, you said the first one was Wednesday, May 9th at 7 p.m.?
Yes.
And it's here or in the community?
It says the community meeting room.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Consent.
Very big thing. Director's report has been done. Items from commissioners. Do we have anybody at this time? Nothing at this time?
No.
If you do, we'll hear from you at the end. Consent calendar, there is none. And we've already covered the public hearings, the 947 North Genesee Avenue, 944 North Ogden. For those who may have tuned in late, will be continued to May 17th. Item 10B, 1011, and 1015 North Crescent Heights will be continued to a date uncertain. Item 10C, 939, 949 North Spalding, and 7732 Romaine also will be continued to a date uncertain. For those of you who may have come to speak on those projects, there were technical issues that need to be addressed so that the public has a proper notice on those items. So we will go on to new business, and we do have an item on the West Hollywood Arts Plan, and I believe we have a staff report about that. We have some staff people.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Campbell. I'm the arts manager for the city, and it's a pleasure to be here and share with you our very exciting WeHo Arts, the plan, the city's cultural plan, which was approved by council back in August. And we are visiting all the various boards and commissions just to give them an update and let them know about the terrific process we were able to go through and some of the recommendations and principles that have emerged from that process. I'm here with our consultant, Amanda Carlson, and we will be presenting some ideas to you. And should you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer those as well. So over 2 years, we spent a lot of time engaging with the community. We had something like over 1,700 engagements with people throughout the community. And we had something called Arts and Culture Pop-Ups, where we would pop up at various events that take place at the city. These could be the Russian Cultural Festival, the Kids Fair. We even did some pop-ups at Starbucks and various businesses throughout the community as well. We also held a number of living room sessions. We had 17 altogether. And these are really designed so that they could be more intimate conversations, more in-depth conversations with constituents, sometimes specific constituents, such as we had a living room session with artists. We had a living room session with writers and poets. We had a living room session with the LGBT community. So we were able to engage with a number of different communities to get their input into the future of arts and culture in West Hollywood. We also did a number of interviews and presentations with the city, including with city staff who have gone through other community engagement processes to pick up some best practices. And because we are the Arts Commission, or representing the Arts Commission, we felt it was very important to include artists in this process and art making in this process in some way. And I'm going to turn this over to our public art our consultant, Amanda Carlson, to discuss that process.
Sure. And so in all of these different forms of engagement that we utilized throughout the process, the idea was to meet people in different ways in different places in the city and to to stagger the level of involvement from something very cursory and informal, like a short conversation on the street, to a more in-depth interaction. And in order to work with artists and embed them in this process, we thought that would be a really rich opportunity to connect with stakeholders who the Arts Division had not necessarily served previously. And so the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission brought on the artist team of Elise Emder and Rostin Wu to work with the commission and design a series of workshops and engagements that could work directly with the West Hollywood Community Day School, which is a high school, and residents of the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation. And so they developed this participatory series of workshops which revolved around intergenerational interviews, high school students interviewing attendees of the workshops and residents of the West Hollywood Community Housing Corporation. It also turned, this series of interviews was like the first part was an interview, and then the second, the people who were interviewing each other made art about the other person's story. And so rather than be an art-making experience where the individual was asked to just create about themselves, which for me personally, I would find that really challenging if somebody just said, make something about your life, and make something about your life in West Hollywood. So rather than do that, they had it be about the content of the stories that were, and the conversation that was just had. And that turned into this really beautiful sharing exercise that was then represented in a gallery exhibit that took place at Kings Road Park. And so there were 3 workshops and then a gallery exhibit at Kings Road Park. And we were very fortunate that a number of the commissioners were actually able to participate in that process, and staff based on, and that turned into a really, I think, impactful experience where the visibility of certain populations within the city were elevated as a result of their participation in a municipal planning exercise. And so that project, Art to Us, in concert with the living room sessions, the interviews, and the arts and culture pop-ups, and the surveys that we did, really allowed us to have a more complete portrait of the residents of West Hollywood and their perspective on how they were not only experiencing art and culture, but their vision for it.
And I think another wonderful outcome out of that particular experience was that it showed us and the commission the fact that that we should not just have people come to us for their art-making experiences, we should also go to them in some way. And in our discussions with a number of different people in a number of different communities, one of the things that emerged from that is that people really want to have an experience, hands-on, with art making and community engagement in some way. I think some of the other interesting things through the interactions that we've had is that we took a very serious look at the Aging in Place initiative and some of the other social issues that are going on. For example, the sense of isolation that many people feel in our community, the growing sense of loneliness, and that the arts are a really wonderful way to help people feel engaged, more engaged with the community, and leads to, we think, stronger mental health and actually physical health as well. So,
and that's just an image of one of the workshops, so you can get a sense of the materials that were being used and the ambiance of it.
and you'll see back in the back there, a familiar face. I happened to participate in these workshops as well, and it was really very, very moving and very enlightening at the same time.
Can I add one more thing? Although the gallery installation was only 1 day long at Kings Road Park, the publication and the interviews and excerpts of the interviews are also available online now. And so there was sort of a long-term result that could still be shared about with the narratives and the visuals that were attached to this project.
And also we had this wonderful commissioner at one time named Rogerio Carvalero, and he also participated in this workshop. So, and I know that he found it a very important experience as well. So out of all of these conversations, the surveys, the engagements that we had with the community, emerged from that through a lot of work with the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission as we continue to winnow these findings down and make them sort of very cohesive, 5 principles and 20 recommendations. Chief among these, and something that we heard across the board from people, is the need for space. And here is probably where this interacts with some of the work that the Planning Commission does, because we are talking about artists needing space to create. We're talking about people having space to gather and watch performances and various different activities. And it is something, it's probably one of the big things that the city, as we know, lacks is space, because we are so built up. So one of the things that we are going to be looking at in space is how we can engage with the Planning Commission, with the Rent Stabilization Commission, Public Facilities Commission, about seeing opportunities for utilizing space that may not be currently utilized for arts and culture activities.
Yeah, I think that's, and the kind of building on the engagement work that we did through the planning process, it really became clear that people wanted to use the arts as a tool to engage with their neighbors and connect to them, and that in times of change, the arts are a really wonderful vehicle to share the values that a city holds. And so the mandate was to sort of continue what we had started, and then also to continue to foster community by bringing people together through art making and the process of creation.
Needless to say, one of the big things facing artists and all the creatives is a need for support. And we're talking about artists, curators, arts administrators, creative individuals all coming together. And we're looking to possibly expand our grant programs through the Arts Division, and also providing opportunities for artists to engage with each other. So out of this process, a couple of things have emerged. First of all, we have established a West Hollywood Artist Registry, so that people who actually are artists and live in West Hollywood can sign up for this registry. That will help us understand who is out there, what type of art they're doing, but also to provide them with sort of the first pass at opportunities that might come up in the city. So they're informed. They get the information that there's a mural project that's coming up. There's an art on construction fence project coming up. Here's the open application process, and so forth. So we have actually, interestingly enough, seen a lot of projects come through in just the past few months where West Hollywood artists have been able to be involved. We also have introduced a West Hollywood Artists Grant, and that is also to support artists who are living in West Hollywood. And it was we had quite a number of people who applied, but it was a small grant just to help artists who live in the city sort of help them with the next step in their career development or their artistic practice. And so we will be announcing four of the four people who received those grants probably within the next month. That was another really great thing. We've also established a muralist roster, and because of the interest that has developed with muralists and doing mural projects in the city, we've established this roster to make it very easy for businesses to access it, should they be interested in doing a roster, should they be required to put art on a construction fence. So these are some of the things also that we're doing.
Yeah, and the mechanisms for support weren't exclusively financial. People were also asking to access resources to connect to one another and to begin to create other vehicles for people to even just connect, because people felt isolated in their practices. And so we also launched WeHo Artist and Art Opportunities Facebook page. So please, and we share these with everybody to encourage people that you know to join the registries and rosters in the Facebook group, because it's through their collective strength that they will continue to be valuable to folks. And so we launched that Facebook group, and we also started something called the Artist Roundtable, which was a riff on the Children's Roundtable that has been really successful. And so the Artist Roundtable is now going to meet 3 times a year and connect not only artists to one another, but also to civic resources, and use the convening power of the city to support the creative industries within West Hollywood.
One of the big things that we always hear...
Could we interrupt you?
Sure.
One of our commissioners has a question before we get too far along. Commissioner Altschul?
Thank you. I just a point of clarification. I think you talked about interacting with the schools and identified some institution as a high school. Which one is that?
It was the West Hollywood Continuation School.
The Community Day School? The West Hollywood Community Day School on Fairfax, just south of Santa Monica.
And
It's a high school for second chances.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Is it attached to Fairfax? Is it, no, or is there a separate?
This standalone building on Fairfax, on the west side of the street.
Just south of Santa
Just
Monica.
south of Santa
Yeah,
Monica.
I know it's in West Hollywood. Is it affiliated with the LAUSD?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things that we always hear from people is, oh, the city should be doing this or the city should be doing that in terms of a performance or a cultural activity. And very often we are already doing it, but people somehow don't seem to hear about it. And I think that happens a lot with things in the city. We're constantly trying ways to better communicate and share what is going on. So one of the big things that we're trying to do, and this is also part of our process here about coming to each of the commissions, is just to explore more visibility for the incredible arts and culture that we have in our city. Just a sidebar, we really do have a very special city, as you all know. We have a very educated community. We have a community that's really interested in arts and culture, and we have a very supportive city council as well, understanding the need for this to take place in our city as not only something that's good for its residents, but also that can attract businesses and attract visitors to the city.
And finally, it wouldn't be the arts if there wasn't a spirit of risk-taking and experimentation involved in it. And so holding that as a final principle to guide how we look at emerging technologies, how we look at disciplines that are not yet, to be discovered or determined or presented in, but also looking at how arts and culture can connect to the ongoing work of the city and other areas that the city might be looking at to build on and grow, and to continuing to hold that risk-taking spirit, not only in the work of the commission, but in the division and the community at large. Yeah, and finally, in the plan itself, which is online, we heard so many great ideas through the planning process, as many planning processes do, that we wanted to make sure that we could hold those and have those be a resource, not only to the city, but to other stakeholders or whoever reads the plan. So the repository of great ideas is the aggregate of all of the actionable ideas we heard during the planning process. So it's a resource and a reference guide.
So we have a big pool of great ideas to draw upon over the next few years. I'll let you talk about communicating.
Yeah, so as one of our principles was visibility, it was important that we share the plan out after we had, after we had listened so intensely for 2 years. It was important that we share back what we had heard. And so, again, embedding artists into the planning process, we brought on three artists. The first one is a woman named Maria La Madrid, who you see in the bottom of this photo. And she led a participatory balloon mapping exercise in Plummer Park with teens from the Teen Center, where they laid out the words art everywhere, anywhere, everywhere, to demonstrate that public art can be anywhere, and then to demonstrate also how we can visualize culture in the art and culture in the built environment. And so literally it was a balloon, so it was visible in the sky. It worked on a number of levels. One more.
Okay.
Then so that's all of those aerial photos were then made into graphics that were shared on the WeHo Arts social media platforms. Then we worked with an artist named Sean Noyce, who's actually a West Hollywood resident, and he developed a series of installations. This one here is at Hart Park, and then another one which is right up the stairs in front of the library, and a sculpture and a series of GIFs for us to use on social media that took the aggregated data from the long-form survey answers and made word clouds out of them. And so his sculpture that was installed one over Hart Park and the other here in front of the library actually had clouds comparable to the size of the times a word was mentioned through the long-form surveys. So another way to visualize our data. And finally, the artist team Yo Merrill created this GIF to represent all of the principles: space, engagement, support, visibility, and experimentation in one image. And these were, again, shared on social media, and then also screened on the billboards on the Sunset Strip. So now we come to our next steps. And Andrew, I'll hand.
Yes, so our next steps are that the commission has gone through a process of discussions to implement the plan. So over the next several months and the next couple of years, we have a number of items that we will be looking at in terms of implementation. And we're obviously incredibly excited about it. The commission is very engaged with it. We are speaking with the city staff and managers about support for certain projects, and we are dedicated and here to move art and culture forward and share it with everyone we possibly can. Okay.
Do any of our commissioners have questions? I'd like to know how the living room sessions were. How did you, I mean, obviously there was an agenda and a direction. How did that work out? I mean,
It was great. People really like to talk. You get them together in a room and you bring up some interesting, and actually Amanda created this sort of interesting game that sort of warmed everybody up and got us all started in conversing. But people wanted to share ideas. We actually had one of our first actually in a living room. We're actually on someone's balcony or patio, and it was terrific. We had some in Plummer Park. We had some in rooms. We had some in the back of a restaurant. So we went all over the place to have these. And people open up, they chat, they converse, and they give us a lot of good ideas and input. After we met with all those folks, we also had 2 additional living room sessions once we sort of gathered everything together. Oops, too hot. We had 5. Oh, sorry. We had 5 of them. And so we got feedback on what we were looking at in terms of implementation and sort of winnowing down to our 5 principles and recommendations.
so you directed it somewhat, the conversations, and in order to get things going.
Yeah, the idea was that we wanted to get to the candor of people's living rooms, right? We're all most comfortable when we're sitting together and there's a healthy
relaxed.
debate. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then with that kind of concept, we came up with a riff on the parlor game. So imagine charades, but you would pull a question out of a bowl to start the conversation flowing, and then it could be directed in a variety of ways. Mm. So to get to that sort of spirit of sharing and candor.
Sounds good. And I'm glad to hear I was on the long-term planning subcommittee when we were talking about doing the murals on the construction fences. So I'm glad that that's finally getting on board, so that people are actually doing it, and that the artists are all volunteering to be on there so that they can be called upon by different developers. So that's cool. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just have one maybe suggestion. Speaking as someone who gets a little overwhelmed by Facebook, LinkedIn, Skype, all the different places I have to go to gather my information for the day. If there were, and this applies just sort of citywide, not just to you, a subscription model more, where I could go to a website like I can now to say, hey, I want to get the council agendas sent to me. That if we had more of our departments, and I know in some companies, very large companies, they have I want the newsletter for the barbecue recipes, I want the newsletter for the baking recipes, I want the newsletter for, grilling, whatever. That if we could have a similar sort of subscription model where I want to hear about art stuff, and I want to hear about housing stuff, and I want to hear about bicycle stuff, or And that's a much larger thing, but then the one place I do go is my email. And that's a guarantee that I'm going to see my email because I have to see it for work. So it's just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
and look forward to hearing more.
And if I can just put one plug in, we have a wonderful program called One City, One Pride that's coming up. It's the city's LGBTQ Arts Festival. It's sort of an additional component to what happens during LA Pride, but it's the deeper, more deeper look into arts and culture and history for the LGBTQ community than what is offered by LA Pride. And so it begins on Harvey Milk Day, and we actually have an event coming up on May 22nd, which is a reading of a play called Dear Harvey. And it will be here in the council chambers at 7:30, I believe. I think I put a flyer up there. And there's a whole slew of really wonderful programming that follows that. I put a little flyer up on on the podium for you, and I think it's really worth checking out. Some really great stuff happening.
Thank you for letting us know that. Okay, thank you very much. Next item is unfinished business, and there is none at this time. Nothing on the excluded consent calendar. Items from staff. Planning manager?
None for this evening.
Not for this evening, okay. Public comment at this time?
We have one, George Biarski.
He already spoke. I think he's only entitled to one, either at the beginning or the end.
Yes, he did speak during the first general comment.
What are you saying? I mean, it's okay with me. We had a very small meeting.
The rule is you either speak at the beginning or the end. You can't do both.
Well, our city attorney's saying it's okay to let him speak, so.
We've had a pretty short meeting, and so.
Even though it's a general rule, tonight we're going to bend it and allow him to come to this podium. Thank you, Mr. Biartzi. You may come forward. Normally, if you speak at the first public comment session, you're not allowed to speak at the second, but tonight we are going to let you do it because we have a small meeting and we have the time today. Thank you for your information.
You're welcome.
But we are going to keep you to your time this time.
Pardon?
We're going to keep you to your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I,
State your name and city of residence again.
I'm sorry.
It's always the beginning.
My name is George Biarski, and I live in West Hollywood. I realize that West Hollywood has a general plan. I realize that West Hollywood has, in fact, progressed through the years. But I think some of the changes are rather fundamental, not in terms of architecture necessarily. They're fundamental, and they're also against the spirit in which West Hollywood was founded. And the founding of West Hollywood was built on rent stabilization, and it was built, I think, on providing that rent stabilization to a number of groups who had found, say, haven in West Hollywood. That included gays and lesbians, that included Russian Jews. I was very confused at the word affordable housing. I didn't know that affordable housing was basically subsidized housing. In the normal sense of the word, affordable housing is what people can afford, and you can minus the very rich because they can, or even the upper middle class because they can generally afford anything. So you're left with the lower middle class, the aspiring middle class, the watch your pennies middle class. And my area, at least, my neighborhood, has been a particular source of refuge for those people and their families. And, you know, in terms of any of the groups, I think now we're the center of the transgender community. In terms of the Russian community, which is old and dying, it's supplemented by children coming in and settling to support their parents, and grandchildren and so on. And all these people are looking for affordable housing in the sense that I said before, and that if I ever come across it again, I'll just emphasize by calling it affordable housing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers at this time?
No other speakers.
Okay. Item 16, items from commissioners. Anybody have anything at this time? No? Thank you. Then we're going to move, I'm going to move the adjournment of this meeting. And our next meeting, which will be Thursday, May 17th, beginning here in this chamber at 6:30 p.m. And that's it. Good night, everybody. Thank you.